Fade in. Cut to.
Exterior. Interior.
Restaurant?
Bar. Club.
Day.
Night.
Action.
Gals, guys, kids, adult kids. Guess what? This is Restaurant Fiction, the podcast that reviews every single restaurant, bar, and club in TV and film, as well as giving you an insider perspective on what it takes to make a fictional restaurant, bar, and club pop on the page. I'm your host, Monis Rose, and today we are giving you part one of our breakdown of the small town bar in Sicily, Alaska, known as The Brick. If you are or are not familiar with The Brick, this is the fictional bar from the early 90s TV show Northern Exposure. We are also talking to screenwriter Henry Jones, who knows The Brick more than anyone we have ever met or will ever meet. I guarantee it. A little bit about Henry before we start. Besides being a badass screenwriter, writing for a couple of Netflix shows, being a prominent force to be reckoned with at the Austin Film Festival, he's got even cooler credits than what his IMDb page says. He's a pool hall champion, TEDx speaker, and knows where to find the best espresso and chocolate chip cookie in all of Los Angeles. Before we begin, just a reminder, this is an edited version of part one. Part two will air in a couple of weeks. If you are too impatient and want to hear the unedited full version, go to patreon.com/restaurantfiction, patreon.com/restaurantfiction. We support our fans who support us and want to give you exclusives no one else will ever hear. Also, if you feel you need a face mask, a journal, or even a baby onesie, Restaurant Fiction has them for you. Go to tpublic.com and search Restaurant Fiction. Okay, without any further ado, here's our review of The Brick from Northern Exposure and our interview with Henry Jones. Go. Guys, Restaurant Fiction, we went to a small town. The small town is called Sicily, Alaska. Sicily, Alaska has anywhere between, a few hundred growing people in it. Why are we even telling you about this small town? Well, it's because of cliches. Yeah, cliches. Cliches are actually very, very important. They're important in writing. They're important in life. And guess what? They're important in a bar. You see, in our experience, yes, occasionally someone might like a craft cocktail at a hipster mixology bar where drinks are a little more than $20. That's fine. We're not condemning that. We actually do support it. But sometimes, actually a few more times than sometimes, a person just wants a bar. Now, it's not even about the drinks. I mean, there's maybe, a couple of beers on tap. Oh, I forgot to mention, we're talking about bars like The Brick. The Brick in Sicily, Alaska. Yes, it meets these cliches. It does. And like we were saying, it has those couple of beers on tap. The bartender can make, any drink that's maybe in the generic bartender's manual, whatever that bartender's manual is. But there's also a pool table. There's also some darts. There's even a pinball machine in the back and a payphone. You remember those? A payphone? Plus, for the kiddies, yes, they don't really card at this bar. They have an icy. You can get a really mean icy. And occasionally some food, There's some Charlie Pride tunes playing during the day, but then at night, people are in a wicked two-step to some classic rock. These are cliches. Why are we mentioning these cliches? It's not to invigorate a country music singer for new material. No, but if you, country music singers out there, need some new material at the bar, you can use this review. Please, we are giving that to you, our blessings. But really, when you're a fish out of water from a place, like when you're coming, especially from the major metropolis to a podunk rural area of society, a bar is going to tell you a lot. It's the cliches of that. You see, yeah, you might not have your bagels. You might not have clean-shaven shins, but you're going to get the gossip. You're going to know who the power players are. You're going to know who's dating who. You're going to see a representation of the neighborhood, of the community. In this case with the Brick, it's pretty much Caucasians and Native Americans. And you see, the Brick holds true to the cliches. And by doing that, it lets anyone put their shoulders down, ease up a little bit. Because places like this, bars like the Brick, these cliches, they offer a safe haven, almost like a rite of passage and a way to assimilate into the community where the bar serves everyone proudly. All right, Henry, what are your thoughts on the Brick, Northern exposure? What do we get right? What do we get wrong? What do you have to add?
But the thing about the Brick, I grew up in small towns in the Midwest, in South Dakota and Minnesota. The thing about like the Brick in Sicily, Alaska, is like it's exactly like every bar in every small town. There's no shame about bringing your kids into a bar. That's where you're going to go for lunch, and you're going to bring your kids. It's the only restaurant there is. I thought I was a real baller the first time I got a Roy Rogers, which is just Coke and grenadine. Sometimes they'll put one of the maraschino cherries in it. But I thought that was alcohol. I thought that's what everybody was doing there. And I was like, man, I see why people come here all the time because this is awesome. Those small town bars, you're not necessarily going there to drink all the time, although there are people that do, obviously. That might be the only place in your town you can actually see another human, right? Otherwise, you're out on your farm. You're out doing farm work, doing whatever. You're out in the field all day, or out with your hogs, you're out with your chickens, you're out with your cattle, whatever it is. And like farm work never ends. And if you don't do it, nobody's going to do it. That's your social hub, like that in church, I guess. Church potlucks and that kind of a thing. Or you get together and you go fishing with buddies, or you go hunting, or you're in 4-H. So for me, the Brick is very much like all of the small town places that I grew up, in and around. If you move to a small town, that would be the place to go. I suppose it's the first place you ought to go. I don't know how many people were in Henry. I want to say maybe like 200 or something. When I first started school, there was a school house, so all of the grades are in one room.
Wait, but you lived on a farm. Do you know your variety of cattle?
I mean, at the time, the Black Angus were all the rage. Just down the road from me was a farm, the Miller Farm. They're the largest Jersey farm in South Dakota, and Jerseys have the highest cream content of any cow. They're the brown cows. But, I'd get up every morning and, go down there and work with Ben and Mary Ellen Miller. Ellen made the best caramels I've ever had in my life. Also the best vanilla ice cream I've ever had in my life, using fresh cream.
What does the Brick say about the world and the characters? Because really, we are introduced to the Brick right in the pilot episode. It's like, here is this Dr. Fleischman. He is in a place that he was not supposed to be. The first place he goes to, which also has a phone, and this is circa 1990, by the way, guys, no cell phones. But the first place he goes to is a bar, is the Brick. What does that say about him? What does that say about the world? I mean, he's looking around, he sees the characters.
There's not much else place to go in Sicily. It's just the place where they all come. They might not all go everywhere. They don't all go to the radio station. They don't all go to Joel's office, although they do end up and everybody ends up there at some point in time. But they all go to the Brick. It's just very accurate to a small town bar. In general, there's probably more alcoholics in a small town bar. There are people that go there and drink every day. They start at 11 o'clock when the bar opens, and they're there all day long. Every location should be a character if you got a TV show. It should have its own tone. It should have its own voice as a place, if it's a place you're going to keep coming back to. Think about sub-basement in Buffalo Bill's house with the well in it in Silence of the Lambs that he's got that girl at the bottom. Tell me that place doesn't have its own voice, right? That's what I mean. Like you go down there and you feel the evil in that place. Now, take that ethic and apply it to somebody's bedroom. Go to True Detective. It's based on his name, but McConaughey's character. His shithole undecorated apartment with a mattress on the floor. This is like the most depressing place ever.
How can, though, a bar enhance the world? How can it enhance the characters?
As far as the characters goes, like that's a big thing. Breaking bread, sharing food. It's kind of the most primal gesture of friendship that we have as human beings. If you want to go like look at the Old West and some weary traveler comes to the door, like, what do? You feed him. When you think about it now, like what's the first thing you do when you go on a date? Take them out to eat, right? What's the first thing you do, like, after you get done with like the business meeting, sit in somebody's office, let's go to lunch. Or you go eat. Like that's how ingrained it is in us as a species to share food as a gesture of friendship, right? Let's go out and eat, right? We're doing it here. We're having cheesecake.
Are there any bar restaurant tropes a writer needs to shy away from? And if so, which ones?
I think that like probably like the stupid somebody bumps into you and spills your drink and that starts a fight thing is an old trope. Anybody who's been to a bar could tell you almost never happens. Like you bump into somebody, you're like, oh my God, dude, I'm so sorry. And they're like, don't worry about it, Or you buy them a drink. If you spilled a lot of it and you go buy them a drink. Right. But very rarely does that all of a sudden like, hey, and now you're fighting.
Well, before we leave all of the bar questions, besides you doing some early writing in Barney's Beanery, besides you being a bouncer in Barney's Beanery, tell me how you became a maven at pool at Barney's Beanery.
Alcohol was a key component. Well, I love to shoot pool. I lived back in Minnesota. I had a roommate named Rick, and I was just terrible. I was just terrible at pool. I'd been floundering around at the local bar on a table for just a year. It's just embarrassing. It wasn't embarrassing for me. It was embarrassing for my roommate. I think one day he's like, man, I just can't watch it anymore. I can't live with this. He took me to the bar and gave me a lesson. And it's just basic stuff. He's like, you're holding your cue wrong. Your fingers are wrong. You're standing wrong. You're aiming at the wrong thing. You're looking at the wrong thing. You're stroking the cue wrong. I mean, everything, literally every single thing that you could do wrong, I did it. That's what I was doing. But so like I got the lessons, I took it to heart. And from then I played pool every night. I got pretty good. And they had it might have been the first and only Barney's Beanery World Series of Pool Championship. I ended up winning it. Now, I drank iced tea the whole tournament. Everyone else drank alcohol the whole tournament. The guy who I was playing against in the final round, Ian, was a phenomenal player. He was way better than me, but he was 3 sheets to the wind. I did win on a pretty phenomenal shot. One that I got a little bracelet. I've still got it. That was the first and last pool tournament I ever played. I'm so rusty at this point.
In your TEDx speech, how to deal with storytelling, how to deal with how storytelling is the fundamental distinctive characteristic of what it means to be a human. How does food add to the element of storytelling?
In the food aspect, when we're talking about developing characters and stuff, like it's a culmination. There's one executive question that I think is inherently flawed. It's this: what's the one thing that this person wants? No person wants one thing. There's not a person on this planet that only wants one thing. Nobody. Not one single person on this planet wants just one thing and one thing only, right? Everybody wants lots of different things, right? They might think, like they might have a goal at a certain point. I want to pass the bar. I want to get the blue ribbon on my prize jersey calf at the county fair. Whatever it is. But no person wants one thing. Real characters are a culmination of all the little things that make them up and all the tiny little details that make them up. It's not one thing. It's a bunch of little details, right? And how they eat and what they eat is one of those little details that like tells you a lot about somebody. Like if you got somebody like, now this isn't the best example because it's a movie about cooking, but Chef, which is a lovely, lovely film by Jon Favreau. You look at how Favreau's character like prepares food and like the care and stuff that he puts into it is constantly being undermined by the guy that owns the restaurant. Right? Dustin Hoffman's character, like at the beginning of this thing, where he's like, well, I fucking pay you, dude. So you're going to make what I want you to make. Right? And he's like, well, I'm a fucking artist. And he ends up having to cook Cubanos in a frickin' food truck. Right? Now he's doing well, but he's still cooking Cubanos in a food truck. And now that I think about it, it's a great metaphor for writing, a great metaphor for screenwriting. You can approach this one of two ways. One is, well, I'm an artist. I'm an artiste with an E at the end, right? I'm going to do what I think is the best artistic move in the thing that I'm writing, despite what the people who are paying me are asking me to do. And then you can end up, and you will end up in the screenwriting version of a food truck. That's where you're going to be, right? That's where you're going to work. Or you can figure out how to address their notes in such a way that you are still happy with what you have made. You can take it as a challenge every time you get something. Now imagine like totally different movie and probably not as good of a movie, but we're talking about real life. But imagine he comes to his character, he says, all right, I want this and that on the menu. And so he's like, all right, I'm going to make the best this and that anybody's ever seen in the world. and I'm going to kick that out of the door. It's the same thing with screenwriting, and where I made a lot of mistakes when I was younger is just in this area, exactly in this area. You get precious about the work, right? And a lot of times the notes are bad, and they're bad on their face. They're not good. They don't make sense of the story. They don't make sense of the character. You think they're going to ruin the whole thing, but that's what your job is. And if you can embrace this, what your job is to execute the notes in such a way that you still love what you're doing, right? That's the challenge. Like, look at it like you're a carpenter, and they're like, you know what? Now that I think about it, I would like a permanent fixture of a baby's crib to stick off the end of this dining room table that retracts underneath the table when the baby's not in it, so it's not in the way, right? Now, it sounds fucking ridiculous. Who wants a crib on their dinner table? But they're paying you. They're paying you to put a crib on a dinner table. So make the most phenomenal crib on a dinner table that you can and make it make sense, right? That's what your job is. If you can embrace that, that's your job instead of it's ridiculous. Because every time you get upset about a note, I'm going to broaden out a little into the spectrum of life. Here's my own little personal metaphor for this, is every time you get upset, you get angry, you get depressed, you get anxious, sad, spiteful, hateful, morose, any of this stuff. Every time that comes up, that's your check engine light going on, right? It's your check engine light popping up and saying, hey, man, there's something for you to look at in yourself, in your car. Think about the insanity of if you were driving your car and the check engine light came on, if you rolled down your window and screamed at the car next to you, my check engine light's on, fix your fucking car. Right? That's what you're doing. When you're acting on the emotional triggers that you're experiencing, you're yelling at somebody else to fix their car because your check engine light is on. That's what it is. If you can embrace that idea, because it's true, it's 100% true, and you'll see it over and over and over and over and over and over again in your life. If you can embrace that philosophy of like, oh, that's my check engine light, dude. The situation that's happening right now, in this example, like you getting a note, and your little emotions get triggered, oh no. Precious emotions. Right? That's your check engine light, dude. They want the same thing that you want, which is they want a movie that's going to be successful, right? They have one idea about it. You might have another idea about it, but they're paying you. So you got to try to figure it out, right? You got to try to thread that needle. And like, how do I do the best I can with what I've got to do it with here? But also what you'll find, and I guarantee this is what you'll find, because I've experienced it in my own life, and I know tons and tons of other people who have that embrace the philosophy, which is that you're responsible for your personal emotional state, no one else. When these things pop up for you, and you're going to say, like, man, this always happens to me. Anytime you're saying, man, this always happens, this keeps happening to me. I've been in this situation before, right? That's the first step, is like you become aware of it. Or you're like, oh, shit, I've been here before. Here's this thing is happening again. And you start having the same emotional reaction that you've had in the past, your righteous indignation, likely. If instead, in that moment, you're like, oh, this is happening again. And I know that what I've done in the past has not profited me at all, right? Not mentally, not physically, not emotionally, not monetarily. Don't do anything. Instead of doing the thing that you've always done, just shut the fuck up, right? Let the thing play. I say, all right, I know what I've done in the past has not helped me, so I'm not going to do that this time. I don't know what, and here's the path of awareness that it takes is I'm not going to do anything this time, but I don't know what to do, so I'm just not going to do anything. I'm just not going to talk, right? I'm going to let it happen. In the case of notes, anytime you get a note you don't like, your response should be, let me think about it. Don't answer it in the room, because they're going to want the answer that you gave them in the room. And also it might be a knee-jerk reaction. Also, if you're emotional about it and you're irritated about it, whatever, it's going to come through. But just say, let me think about it. And then go think about it later. Cool down for a couple days, right? But then the next time that this whatever instance comes up and you get triggered, you're going to like, oh, here it is again. Son of a bitch. All right, now I don't know exactly what to do, but you're going to feel like you're a little bit outside of it. You're almost like you're watching it happen because you're aware that it's happening again. Like, here's this thing happening again, and I'm getting angry about it again. But how do I do it differently? I'm going to try to say the opposite of the thing. Just try a different tactic. Instead of saying, like, listen, I don't think that's going to work for the character, you just say, let me think about it. And you do, and you go back and think about it. So, and then the next time what happens is you see it further out. You see it before it even develops. You're like, oh, shit, here it comes again. This is so funny. I can't believe this has been happening my whole life. And I've not noticed this. Here it comes again, and I know what I'm going to do this time, right? In this note example, for instance, if you're getting triggered by it, then you need to address that's your check engine light going on, not theirs. They're not doing anything wrong. It's like if you're getting triggered, it's you, right? No one's responsible for your emotional state but you. So then you're like, all right, I'm going to do this thing about it, and then that next step is like you resolve the situation, and then I'm going to tell you magically what happens. Now it's probably going to happen another time. It's always like a different person or, whatever different situation, but it's the same situation, right? Essentially happening where you're having the same emotional trigger to it, something from your past, whatever it might be. Only this time, like you're standing outside of it and like you really do feel like it's a third person experience almost. Like you're watching it happen like, oh, here it comes again. Right. And now I realize like, oh shit, it's because of whatever. When my mom took away my favorite Transformer when I was a kid or whatever. You don't even have to go that deep in this case. But you see it coming so far out. You're like, oh, I know what's going to happen and I know how to address it. And then what happens is you see it so far away that you head it off at the pass before it even goes down. And then the next step is it stops happening because you're not acting the same way you were. You've broken the pattern of it. And it just stops happening. And you'll see this like over and over and over and over and over again. Like keeping in a fight with your wife, or your husband or your girlfriend or like whatever it is over the same thing every fucking time, right? It's you, right? Now, they're also responsible for them, but you can't do anything about them. You can only do something about you. That was my core difficulty as a writer, as a person, as everyone's core difficulty as a writer person, to go from blame to ownership of your emotional state, which is nobody's responsible for your emotional state, only you. I know it's off topic, but it was such an enlightening conversation. I had a conversation with a 9-year-old kid at my daughter's school. It's a gifted school, so there's a bunch of little geniuses running around in here. The kid asks me, we're sitting in the parking lot. It was like, drive-through COVID graduation. Sitting in the parking lot eating snow cones. And the kid in the car next to me looks over, and I had like come and spoken on writing or something at their school, and so he knew who I was. But he looks over and he asks me, he says, are emotions real? And I said, well, let's break it down, shall we? So let's say that like, that tree in front of your car, let's say that you hate that tree more than anything in the world. And every morning you wake up in the morning and you go 9 to 5, you stand in front of that tree and you hate it as hard as you can. What happens to the tree? And he's like, well, nothing happens to the tree. And I'm like, okay, so let's break that down. What is that? You hated it as hard as you could. And you felt that emotion as strongly as you could. Yet it did not affect reality. It did not affect reality whatsoever, not in the slightest, not one drop, not one whit, right? I'm like, so what does that tell you? He's like, that my emotions are not connected to reality. There's no causality between my internal emotional state and the physical world. I'm like, yes, that's correct. That's 100% correct. Now, also, the inverse then is true. The physical world is not the cause for your emotional. There's no causality because they're not connected. Your emotional state is entirely subjective to you. If you died and every emotion you've ever had in your life dies with you, what happens to reality? Nothing. Nothing. Nothing changes. The world and the universe continues apace, right? Now, if, because you hate it so much, you take the physical action of cutting down the tree to try to resolve your internal emotional state. But remember, the two things aren't connected. So you're trying to resolve an internal emotional, non-physical state entirely subjective to you by attacking something in the completely unconnected physical world. So no, for a moment, you might feel better, like, oh, yeah, the tree's down. But then the hate's going to come cropping back, and it's going to fixate on something else because it's in you. It's not caused by the physical world. It's inside you. And that's where it needs to be addressed. A lot of people talk on this exact subject. And as a matter of fact, years and years and years ago, I was at a Writers Guild conference, and Craig Mazin was giving a speech. And it was about how to navigate a studio and how to stay on a picture through production. So he's like, all right, you're a studio film, and you've turned in your script. There's producers, and there's studio executives, and there's a director, and there's the actor, and the actor's agents, and on and on and on and on. Who's your enemy, right? Who's your enemy in this situation? People are raising their hands. Oh, it's the director because of this. It's the studio because of that. It's, whatever. And everybody kind of says their piece. And then Craig goes, your only enemy is your personal emotional pain. That's it. Right? Everything else in this situation is an illusion. Your enemy is your personal emotional pain. That's what's stopping you from being able to navigate this situation. If you removed your personal emotion, which is exactly the same thing I'm talking about, your emotions aren't connected to reality. If you remove that from this process, now, which is not to say you don't have emotions. Of course, you're going to have emotions, right? And that's how we develop as human beings, by addressing those, especially the negative emotions. Dude, if you're feeling happy and awesome all the time, yeah, bro, pretty solid, bro, right? If you're depressed all the time or angry all the time, you're angry in traffic all the time, and honestly, that's one of the signs. You live in LA, if you're cussing out people in traffic all the time, one, it's going to backfire on you. Somebody's going to get out of their car. It's going to get serious. But instead, dude, I did it myself because I noticed. I was like, dang, dude, you're angry. Right? Every misstep in traffic, and even when they're yours. So instead I took the step of whatever, somebody cuts me off, and I'm like, you know what? I hope that person gets home safely. I hope they get home safely. I hope they make it home all right and nobody gets hurt on their way. Change it up. Make it a positive thing. But Craig was right. then. And I'm ripping somebody off here. I don't know who it is, but they say that like a smart man can learn from his mistakes and a wise man can learn from the mistakes of others. And I'm not a wise man, and I never have been. But I'm just at 43 starting to become smart and learn from my mistakes, which a lot of people do it a lot younger than I have. But like I've never had a failure of craft. I've never had a failure of craft where I couldn't deliver on what I said I would do or what they wanted. However, I've had multiple failures of ownership, right? Failures of like blaming somebody else because I'm pissed off, right? Blaming somebody else because I don't like their notes. Blaming somebody else because their project's not going the direction I wanted or at the pace I wanted or whatever it might be. Had I had the wherewithal at the time, I would have navigated those situations much differently. What the outcome would have been is anybody's guess. You can't go back and change the past. The fact of the matter is, like, don't beat yourself up about your past crap decisions. Because if you could have done better at the time, and I mean this in the most literal sense, if you could have done better, you would have. But you couldn't. You couldn't. That's where you were. Emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, that's where you were at that period in time. If you could have done better, you would have done better. But you could not at that point in time. Right? You did not have the wherewithal to make the right choices. You did not have the wherewithal to be responsible for your emotional state. You did not have the wherewithal to recognize that nobody in the studio was against you. Right? It was your personal emotional pain. I've gotten completely off topic. I don't even know how I got there. That's my diatribe on how to comport yourself in life.
Thank you, Henry. Fucking awesome. Can't wait to hear what you have to say in part 2. Remember, guys, if you want to listen to part 2, the unedited version now, simply support us on patreon.com/restaurantfiction. It's the best way to listen to ad-free exclusive episodes, plus get in contact with me and all of our crew here. For those who want to watch Henry's work right now, listen to his TEDx talk called The Gift of Story. And when the awesome Black Summer Season 2 airs, make sure to turn on your Netflix and watch Henry's work. All right, that's enough for now. Until part 2, I'm Monis Rose, and keep it real, keep it fresh, and keep it on the flip side.
Cut to
Exterior. Interior.
Restaurant?
Bar.